Hello and welcome to the final ever Gooners podcast.
Kind of feels like it should be, doesn't it?
Aren't we just going to do what every other Arsenal supporter from various parts of the world, they're just going to jump ship and support another team because they can't handle this anymore?
I've seen a ridiculous amount of that on Facebook in the various groups. It's like, I'm finally done. I'm going to Man City. Fuck off and go there. Welcome to the 38th episode of our third season here on the Gooners pod. Our working title today is called Champions League is for Nerds. So, and Arsenal ain't no nerd, man. So fuck that, clearly. But we do have a duck breaker on with us today, John Welsh from A Bergkamp Wonderland. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
It's only taken 130 episodes for us to have you on.
It is something like that. I think I've managed to dodge like the past 3-4 weeks in a row. Something.
It makes it seem like I've been asking you on every week, like we're desperate or something like that. But feel free, because that's actually pretty much what's happened.
Yeah.
You paid my appearance fee yesterday. It's fine.
Exactly, we did. We donated $1.99 to Bergkamp Wonderland and got that taken care of which they get to keep, I think, 20%. Second straight.
Danny takes 80%. Is that why?
Yeah. Well, who does?
Danny.
Oh yeah, no. Danny gets the 15% that YouTube doesn't keep. Second straight Bergkamp Wonderland guest. If you remember, Andy, last week we had Jason Davies on. If we have one more podcaster from ABW on, we get the fourth one for free.
Ooh.
But you finally made it internationally, John. You're on in America and in Mozambique and everywhere else. Finally, I had to tell Andy, we can't keep banning people other than Jason and this guy from coming on anymore. You got to give that up. I want to talk to some other people. And he said no, so I just told him that you were Danny and that you'd be in the bath.
You know, I've sort of got the beard. I could work on the weight. That's not a problem. I'm happy to try.
And you have the backlighting of Jason, so it's kind of like we're having the best of both worlds, except you're not in the bath. But so tell me, how did you end up with those guys? It's been, what, 3-4 years? How did they discover the talent that is John Welsh?
Yeah, talent's one word for it, I guess. How did they? I think I just started, like most people, just like found the podcast and was listening to it and started chatting to the guys on Twitter. And I think it was Chris actually reached out to me and asked if I'd come on to one of the transfer deadline day specials. I've been talking a lot about Italian football. It's like Serie A is kind of like my little pet favorite thing. We got chatting about our favorite players from the 90s, that kind of thing, shared interests. Invited me on, did my little 10-minute spiel or whatever with some other listeners, as they do most seasons. And yeah, they just asked me to come back again. Started to become a bit more regular on the podcast, and then see Chris had the idea and started the radio show that we do after every game, and it just went from there. Chris then disappeared, ran away, and just went, Jason, run with it.
He went to grow his hair.
Yeah.
Buy bed sheets. Yeah, this was when the podcast was just in rapid accumulation of hipster mode, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they picked up me. Josh came along as well. Ellis, I guess, is hipster. He's technically not, but because he lives in Norwich and they've got web feet and stuff, it's kind of the same thing. It's close enough.
Drew's in the chat right now.
Yeah, we had Drew as
making
well.
His triumphant return with you yesterday.
Yes, it was very nice to have Drew on. Someone talking sense and actually knew something about football, whereas normally me and Jason just talking complete bollocks.
No, I'm talking about Drew Thompson.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You're talking about a different Drew, I guess. So I just assumed you joined the pod because Danny ran you over and then offered you a spot on the award-winning podcast so you wouldn't sue him. But speaking of which, Danny is joining us today in a way. And because we also had an ABW on last week, this thing has been up there for a week, and I forgot about it. My son and his friends came down to play FIFA in our basement, which is where I podcast from, and we're now paying for their counseling. They're very, very traumatized. One last question before we get into a couple things. Why the Seattle Supersonics and New Orleans Saints? I always wonder about that.
Okay, so I haven't watched basketball for like years, like a very, very long time. My cousin was a big basketball fan when we were growing up, and I think it was probably playing NBA Jam or something like that on the Super Nintendo. And I just liked the Sonics. I was like, oh, that's a cool name. And yeah, I like the I can't remember I think it was Gary Payton maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Then they drafted one of the best players of the last 20 years, and the next season moved out of Seattle, absolutely crushing their fans.
And I think like over here we had like Basketball One on like one of the terrestrial channels you didn't need Sky or anything for a few years when I was growing up, and then it went off a bit like American football did the same. And yeah, I just sort of lost track of it. If I watched basketball now, I wouldn't have an idea on any of the players, like the teams, half of them I've never heard of. And the same thing, I think the New Orleans Saints I'm a very big Pantera fan, if any of your listeners know who Pantera is. And yeah, Phil Anselmo is from New Orleans. He always talked about the Saints. I started watching American football. I was like, well, if they're good enough for Phil Anselmo, they're good enough for me.
Nice.
That was it.
Nice. And we have a couple other Saints fans that hang around us and follow us. So we'll mention that a little bit later because one of them has a user question. Just a reminder that we can be seen just about every week on YouTube, except for when we just don't feel like it. Either live or on demand. Subscribe to our channel. Click the bell, not this one, but the one on YouTube. And you can be notified whenever we go live with incredible new content, and also when we go live with shit content. If you don't want to torture yourselves with our faces, you can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Acast, Friendster, SiriusXM, TalkSport, and the BBC. We're also on Pornhub. If you didn't know that, John. John, have you ever? I'm not fucking with you either. Have you ever wanted to be a porn star? Because we could throw this puppy up here and see how many
on Pornhub.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody. You know, we have to get the consent of our guests. I mean,
please put me. I mean, that would make my year.
We could throw this puppy up and see how many people search for bearded British and ass play, and your thing will come up as most relevant. Andy, do you know that? I know that you know of 2 of our videos on YouTube, but do you know that we now have a 3rd?
I didn't. Which one did you post?
It's a very exciting footage of me brushing my teeth from last week.
You did send me that, and I opened it and then immediately gagged and turned it off.
It is that's the reaction I was going for. It is full toothbrush penetration. I'm actually so into dental hygiene. Most people don't know this. I actually took 2 brushes at once. It was incredible. So yeah, there's that.
What's our listener count up to now?
Listener, 0. Up to. What are you talking about? Up to.
Are we still the largest football podcast on Pornhub?
I would probably say so. We're large and throbbing. So, all right. So, speaking of our chat room, which I hadn't mentioned yet, but now I am, we got some people joining us. First of all, Grant Wilborn, thanks for joining us. Grant was in the chat for your pod yesterday, John, and took Danny's kind advice to subscribe to our channel. So it's nice to have new people along. Thanks, Grant. Drew's in here, of course. Mike Hernandez, thanks for joining us. Sebi's in here, the master of what's it called? Of things. Ryan Koss is in here. Mecha Fred Zilla, who I believe is our Saints fan. Fredo from New Orleans, who's now leaving, and Pat Brady. Thank you. Most people are commenting positive things. I don't know why about this thing over my shoulder, but let's start on a bright note because there are not so many bright notes today. Our Europa League campaign is still alive and well, despite a nervy start. Spoiler, John. I'm going to ask you a trick question. Do you know what league Valencia play in?
That's a really tough one. I'm honestly, I know I was on a thing called the Football Hipsters, but I could only do Italian teams, so I haven't got a clue where they come from.
But they definitely don't. Football hipsters don't know this. Andy, what league do they come from?
It's a feeder league.
Yeah, it's the feeder league.
It's a feeder league.
Yep. That's just a thing for us. Sorry. The opening Valencia goal, Mustafi, man. Look, I mean, I know that he really didn't have much to do with the header, but he let the ball go off him for a corner. So the goal's obviously all his fault, right? I mean, this is now the 93rd goal he's allowed this year directly from a Mustafi error.
Mike, whenever Mustafi sets his foot on the pitch, any goal going in is related to him in some way.
Twice. And you know, this one is pretty clear. He's a secret agent for Valencia. The only reason he didn't do a better job helping them win is because he sucked so much he couldn't score against his own team enough. And actually, he was all right on Thursday, wasn't he? Not so bad, John.
Yeah, I thought he played pretty well, to be honest. It's weird. Like I get the hatred Mustafi gets, but you look at stats and stuff and everything and compare him with the other defenders this season. He's actually one of our, I think statistically, probably still our best defender, which sounds bizarre to say. The problem is every mistake he makes is so pronounced and so obvious. Mm-hmm. Everyone just jumps on it really quickly. If you see games where Socrates is the one who leads to errors in a game and goals, they're more subtle and not quite as obvious, I think. And that's maybe why. The other reason, obviously, he doesn't get as much stick because he's a new player. So, it's his first season, that kind of thing. But I actually thought he had a good game. And to be fair, the last couple of games, I don't think he's really done that much wrong.
It's too late, though. The narrative's already set. And
I mean, I think the time at the club is gone. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was looking at an article. I was kind of doing some research on some of our, some of the Premier League defenders that are considered top 10. And I saw one. It was from January, granted, but Mustafi was listed as the number 7 central defender in the Premier League to that point. And I'm like, who is making this list? But Andy, you were about to comment on Mustafi as well.
No, I thought he played really well on Thursday. And as John mentioned, it just every mistake he makes is just leads to a goal. The question I wanted to ask you boys is, if we do keep him next season, but we bring in reinforcements and he becomes a squad player, I'd be okay with it. If he didn't get as much playing time as he did now and he rotated in. But because I just don't see how we can sell him for a great profit. I wish he has improved.
There'll be no profit if you're looking at his transfer fee. It's selling him for residue basically at this point.
So what's the point in shipping him for 10 or 12 million pounds, which I think is probably the rate he would go for, maybe even a little bit more. But what's the point in shipping him when he is young, he does defend well, statistically he is decent. I would keep him, but maybe try and switch him into a squad player. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'd take him as a squad player. I mean, I take most of our players as squad players. The problem is some of them aren't. But that's a discussion for another time. Ultimately, after a shaky first 10 minutes, the cream rose to the top, and for the last 75 or 80 minutes, we were super creamy. Should have had 5 or 6 goals probably. It's hard to blame Lacazette after starting the game with starting the first half with an early brace. But if he was just a bit sharper after that, we would be starting a reserve team on Thursday and easily starting to think about Baku. And instead, we've still got a little bit of work ahead of us. Andy, did we miss an opportunity, or do you think we're still safe?
You're never safe when you're Arsenal, right?
That's true.
But listen, I think that the fact that they started with 5 or 6 defenders, I forget how many, and we still put that much pressure on, they're going to have to go at us. I think that's going to allow us to counterattack. I think if we can get through that first 20 minutes without conceding, I think we can get the away goal. So I think that we're comfortably through at this point. But again, it's Arsenal. You just never know. John, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, the third goal in the game was huge because I think at 2-1, it is such a different prospect going out there. But 3-1, Valencia have got to come out more. It's not in their nature. They're a defensive team who like to hit on the counter. And we can almost, in a way, just say, look, you can have the ball. We're just going to sit. And you've got 2 ways of going about it. And I think it'll be interesting to see. I think he should go with just one up top. And I think you can go either way. You could start with Aubameyang if you want and just let them have the ball and just try and break and use his pace. Or you can have Lacazette, just work them, try and wear them down slowly over time, and you chuck Alba on at 60, 65 minutes when they are a bit more tired and they've got to open up even more if they still haven't scored, and just exploit that space. So I'm much more pleased with the 3-1. 2-1 would have been, I would have been sat there watching it through my through my hands kind of thing. But yeah, I agree. We missed a few opportunities in the game, but let's not kid ourselves. Valencia did have a few chances themselves as well that they could have done better with. So I think 3-1 at home, most fans would have taken that straight away before the game.
Yeah. At 2-1, I mean, you almost go into that as Valencia saying we've given ourselves the best opportunity that we can without coming out with a result. I mean, 1-0, a 1-0 loss on the away leg, and you're you're vulnerable to one away goal on the way back. But when you score one and only lose by one goal, I mean, I think you're fine. So that the amount of opportunities that Lacazette in the second half blew to get that third goal, it made an absolute huge difference to see Aubameyang put that one in before the end. So something that I think only about 15,000 people in the Emirates actually saw live. Unfortunately, get some great user questions coming in already in the chat. I'm saving those, and we will be going through those later. So thank you for those. Michael Hernandez says hello to you and fuck Ellis.
Hashtag fuck Ellis, yeah.
Which is a big staple on the Bergkamp Wonderland. So now let's get on to brighter topics like Brighton.
Yeah.
Andy, I'm going to hand it to you because you are the master of torture.
Yeah, man. Well, I want to start off with the Aaron Ramsey Guard of Honor. I know that that check, and then we'll get to it with Welbeck. But I watched the video of him breaking down. I didn't get to see it live, and I was genuinely sad. I think he's the end of that British core we were so desperately wanting to achieve greatness at Arsenal. And
you're not holding out hope for Genko?
No.
He's the one that made it.
I know. It's so sad to see him go, and whatever the circumstances were with his contract, I think the mark he's left on our club is nothing but positive. His professionalism since August, when this was really kind of announced that he wouldn't be extending, has been nothing short of just class, Mike. You've mentioned it about how he turned you. I wish him all the best at Juventus, but he was probably the player we were desperately needing against Brighton. And we've desperately needed a lot this season, and I hope that we get a suitable replacement for him. But Mike, I don't know if you have a thought on that breakdown that he had, where he had to get coddled by Czech at the end of it.
I'll tell you what, I heard that as soon as the game ended in the pub, we were basically begging them to turn it off. So I actually missed a lot of the post game stuff if they televised it over here, and decided not to watch it because I had mixed feelings about the whole Guard of Honor in general after the way that we limped through the end of the Premier League. But as far as Ramsey's concerned, I echo your sentiments completely. I mean, at this point, the contract issue is just it's just crying over spilled milk. Whatever happened, whoever was responsible, doesn't matter anymore, and we have to hold on to what we've recently said, which is that we're not going to let these, final years of contracts even approach anymore, that we're not going to let it happen again with players who who are an important part of our squad. I'm not talking about Lichtsteiner. He's still not an Arsenal legend in my mind for what it's worth, but he's definitely turned me as a consummate professional in how he handled the last 4 months at the club. I mean, it's clear he was at some point the most committed player of our 24 or of our 18, and he was the one with his foot out the door. And I just cannot conceive, that's a statement on a lot of things, but it's a positive statement on Rambo. Mm-hmm. And it is no small surprise or coincidence that since he went down against Napoli, we've taken 1 point out of 12 in the Premier League and missed out on the top 4. Someone else that's leaving, Danny Welbeck.
Oh yeah, but John, do you have anything you want to add to the Ramsey? I guess I was really referring to him weeping in Czech's arms. But what's your thought on the whole him departure? And
I mean, I think everything's been said on the whole contract thing. I'm often on with Jason, who's obviously Ramsey's biggest fan in the world. But I'm a big Ramsey fan. I've always liked him, and it was that made me emotional. It reminded me a little bit of some other players leaving the club, like when Bergkamp retired, and you could see the emotion in him, how much the club meant to him when Ian Wright left. And it kind of had the same, feeling to me. I still get the impression that he didn't want to leave, that he would have stayed had things been opened up again. But he basically he summed it up perfectly. He went from being a boy to a man at the club. And at one point yesterday,
Andy's done that on our podcast.
At one point yesterday, I did think to myself, I might have to drive all the way to Wales to go and check that Jason is all right. Because if Jason sees any of those videos of Ramsey crying,
welfare check. Take a look at his wrists.
I think in a few months from now, when the dust settles and he's probably in Italy and he pulls on that Juventus shirt, he's probably going to be happier that he made the move, considering how well they're going to be and how good they are challenging for titles, and especially Champions League. I mean, he's going to fit right in. And I think he'll get a lot of playing time if he stays healthy. Is Welbeck done? I didn't see the whole ceremony, but he got one of those sexy boxes. So I'm assuming that he is being shipped in the summer.
Yeah, they're not bringing him back. And speaking of sexy boxes, how's your mom doing?
Oh, God. I'll take it because I was making sex jokes about your mom this morning on text. So we're even.
I'm nothing if not predictable. I mean, I don't want to disappoint people when it comes to
So he is done. I wrote this last night and then I didn't look it up because I wanted to, obviously like have the conversation. But what are our thoughts here? Because for me, we're opening up a lot of cash. I think he's on 125 or 150 a week. He's constantly injured. But again, could we not have done what Tottenham are doing with some of these players and giving a decent weekly wage with a high performance bonus and saying to him, hey, you're healthy when you play. If you score, assist, or whatever, we're gonna give you a cash bonus.
I think we've missed Welbeck a lot more than people realise.
I do too.
I think he's not the most prolific goal scorer, but to have someone in your squad who can play that many different positions, who will work that hard backwards as well off the ball, and he always runs in behind, and it's the one thing since Ramsey's been out of the team, we haven't had anyone else who will run beyond Lacazette or Aubameyang really, and Welbeck is someone who does that, and Ramsey's another player who does that. We don't have anyone else in the squad who does those kind of things, and even if they're not scoring the goals, it just opens up the space and makes it easier for Lacazette or Aubameyang to score. So I do think it is. I understand the club's decision because of his injury record, but I think you're going to be hard pushed to find a player who's got his level of experience and who will happily play second fiddle to other strikers and will, just whatever the manager says, yeah, fine, yes, boss, I'll do that, and whatever is asked of him, he gets on and does. There's a reason why Alex Ferguson liked him so much. He always played in big games. It wasn't because he scored goals, it was because he did exactly what the manager asked of him. And I think those kind of players are very invaluable in squads. So they're, from an injury standpoint and everything else, maybe the medical team know something that, whatever injury he's had now is going to make it more difficult to him to play consistently. So if that's the reasoning, then fine. But you do definitely need to replace that. And it's hard to get that player who can play so many different positions and so many roles in one player.
Yeah, you have to replace him. The thing that keeps me thinking that this makes sense, obviously, the peak in-form, healthy Welbeck, as we finally saw at points in the last two seasons before injuries, is a great help, as you've said. But, a couple seasons ago when we pledged 160,000 combined pounds per week to Per Mertesacker and Santi Cazorla, who combined, I think, played another 4 games for us the following season.
Yeah.
All per. That hurts. That was part of, and that was the sentimentally acceptable part of, but part of our salary and wage restrictions that we dealt with are those kinds of contracts given out to players who can't contribute. So I don't know what Welbeck's recovery is. It was a broken leg, not an ACL. So, he may be back. It might have been back by the beginning of next season, or it might have been a couple of months in, like a Bellerin type of situation. But, if we spend money wisely, and we're not getting money for him, but we are conserving salary, we have to replace with a like player, not just from a skill perspective or a goal scoring perspective, but from a mentality perspective to do the tough things. We can't, to replace him with someone like Zaha, who, is all flash and substance and attacking and isn't going to do, in my opinion, I may be wrong because, my tactical news issues, but, it's just not going to be like for like. It's not going to be an improvement.
Yeah.
And it stunted a little bit as well, Eddie Nketiah, who I think Welbeck doesn't get injured and Nketiah actually gets a loan move, and he goes out and gets some playing time. And that's a season essentially wasted for Nketiah. It's not his fault. It's just the club are in a position where they can't afford to send him out on loan now because they've only got 2 strikers.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Yeah. The rumor mill, as I just Googled, is that Welbeck might be on his way to Everton, which could be a good home for him. I bet, it's a suitable position.
It's a good replacement for Theo.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we can get Theo back. So yesterday's home draw with Brighton effectively ends our chances at finishing in the top 4. Technically, if Spurs lose, we win, and those two results make up an 8-goal difference. An 8-goal difference. We'll finish in 4th, but that isn't going to happen, right, Mike?
No,
we're clearly going to win 7-0.
No. This is how it's going to happen. 90th minute, Everton gets a controversial penalty against an 8-man Tottenham. And scores to make it a 7-0 win. So they've done their job. Meanwhile, at Turf Moor, Arsenal is holding on to a 1-0 lead in the 94th minute, concedes a penalty from Mustafi slide tackling a guy who didn't even have the ball. And we finish 5th on goal difference. So that's I'm looking for online betting sites where I can bet just that exact scenario because, it's just the easiest money I've ever made. Can you get a penalty for slide tackling somebody who's like across the box from where the actual ball?
They're in their penalty box. He just goes and slide tackles their keeper.
And somehow they call a penalty the other way.
So Brighton are in 17th, probably partied in London extremely hard knowing that they were going to be staying up. And we can't even register a win. That's a pretty damning statement. Like, a team with nothing to play for.
Yeah.
We couldn't even show up against them.
Well, teams with nothing to play for love us. We're a team that, in the last 2 months has been completely afraid of our own shot. Scared of success. And I would say that we're playing down to the level of our opponents, except we're playing down to the level, way beneath our opponents. And, this is the maddening thing that you could end up spending 2 hours moaning about. But, Brighton had nothing to play for, John.
No.
Yeah,
what do you do when you have nothing, no meaning to? Do you come out and dominate in those situations?
No, I think it frees them up a little bit, and they don't have to play the defensive football they've played all season under Chris Hughton that their fans have been complaining about. And they've got some decent players. Basuma yesterday I thought was quite good for them. Solly March isn't a bad player either. The two centre backs as well, Duffy and Dunk, are both very good. But if you come into this game, we know we have to go out and hit it. And I thought we started right and we had the right attitude. But Brighton just went, we've got nothing to lose. It doesn't matter. It's a free roll for them, and they can go out and express themselves a little bit for the first time this season. It doesn't matter what the manager says because that we've stayed up, we've done our job. I just think the nerves got to the players yesterday, and I think that's the big thing that I've noticed this season is people have spoken for years about mentality of the squad and we need more leaders and this, that, and the other. And I've tended to agree sometimes. I think it's been a bit overstated. But when you look at, I know yesterday was a home game, but you look at our away form to our home form, it's so dramatically different that it's got to be in their heads. And I think in certain games they go out on the pitch and they think they've already won it, and then they just don't put the effort in. Because I thought the application at the start of the game was okay, but I thought Emery got the lineup horribly wrong, the formation. Because Brighton are going to sit in. So what do you need? You need width. You're not going to get width with the players we had on the pitch. The only way this team has any width in it is when we play with wingbacks.
If they want width, they need to sign me. I'm wide AF.
Mike, we had 71% possession. We took 20 shots. 8 of them were on target. But despite all that, we could only force one quality save out of Ryan. And I know Aubameyang had that dreadful miss, but where do you think we're failing? Is it the build-up play? Are we just losing possession too much in midfield?
You're asking me about tactics?
No.
Yeah.
We could go to John if he wants to answer that. It's just there's clearly something missing. We can all see it. And I think when you look at or you hear about Emery, where there's rumors that he stays up until 2 a.m. in the morning with his team going over tactics. Is he pouring too much thought into this, or are we severely lacking certain areas of the pitch?
The skill of our players is not good enough on the whole. There's no question about that. But we've seen teams excel well above their punching weight when their skills are not anywhere close to what ours are. And so, again, I'm not just saying this because I'm the opposite of a tactical genius, but I think it's more in the mentality. I like John was saying, we've got, for lack of a better word, a considerable level of bottlers on our team that don't have the mentality to just burst through pressure and burst through being afraid of losing. Just as Brighton had nothing to lose yesterday, we had everything to lose yesterday, and we played like we were scared of losing. Even when we went up 1-0, we, after about 5 or 10 more minutes of being on the front foot, the game just shifted. And this is a mentality issue, and it isn't necessarily all 11 that have to have that same bad mentality, which is why I'm still holding on hope to, that gradual shifts of some of these people out of the club and replaced with other people, if they're the right people, can start to shift that. I thought that mentality had shifted earlier in the season. I really did during the 23-game winning streak or unbeaten streak, or 22, whatever it was. I really started to feel good about that changing, but it clearly hasn't changed. And Emery can pour all the knowledge and skill and game plan into these players that he wants, but if they're not going to accept it and process it the right way, we're going to end up failing at the biggest opportunities.
So I had in 16 years from now, Mike, you can thank me for my
for Ollie.
For my passion of taking my not even 2-year-old son to football practice on Sunday mornings, and driving 40 minutes to get there.
Do you push him around in that little like in a crib?
I gotta send you a video. I gotta send you a video because there's a video where he's literally dribbling through all the people, and one kid's got a cone on his head. And
that was Danny when he was growing up.
Happened in Jake's U17 practice the other day too.
The coach came over to me and she goes, "I think he's a child prodigy." And I pointed to the kid with a cone on its head, and I said, "No, I think he's the only one who's actually just like dribbled the ball before." But so in 18 years, you can thank me for this. So I had to listen to the first half on the Arsenal player, and Ali Adier was doing the co-commentary, and he was talking about the question was asked, like, at this point in the season, when you're a safe team, what's going through the mind of a player when you walk onto the pitch? And he essentially said, you do not want to get hurt. You do like 50-50 tackles. You don't want to go in. Like, you want to be like, you're not thinking of the beach. You're not thinking of vacation. You're thinking of preseason. You want to come back healthy and strong. And so when you go into these matches, the 50-50 challenges aren't there. You're going to pull out. You're not going to be making those quick sprint runs because you don't want to pull a hammy. So he's like, your mentality in your mind is go out there and don't get hurt. Give effort, but don't give 100%, right? That all being said, and Brighton are not that good a team. They didn't. I don't think they played like that. And for a team like Arsenal, who has everything to play for, we should have been giving 100%, if not more, and going in even harder. And it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful. Let's get to the two soft penalties quick. I don't think either were, but Xhaka doesn't need to make that contact. It's just absolutely atrocious. And now, granted, the player goes down very softly, but we know every player in that scenario in the box is going to go to ground. He knew what was going to happen. There's just no reason for it. It's just such piss poor mentality from Xhaka to make that just atrocious challenge. It was so bad.
And this from Xhaka's biggest fan, but I'm glad that you aren't. I mean, there's no way to put a lipstick on that pig yesterday. And I don't mean he's a pig. I mean that play was a pig. Lest I be misunderstood for the 97,000th time this week. I thought the penalty on Monreal was legit until I saw the 20th replay, and it looked to me like the defender not only won the ball but barely touched at all. Yeah. Monreal. So Monreal's not one to typically dive. Speaking of Welbeck, like his dive in the Milan game last year, which I was at and I absolutely loved.
The last time you played for Arsenal, right?
Yeah, that was the last time I played. It was a lucky penalty, and that the ref probably looked at that play at halftime and said, if there's anything even remotely close to a penalty going the other way in the second half, I'm calling it. And Xhaka gave it to him. It was another boner from Xhaka, and not the kind that you like, Andy. No need to make contact. He was already beat. He should have been focused on trying to deny the cross instead of pulling him back. Total dive, shameless dive. But, it is what it is. We still had, after that penalty, about 25 to 30 minutes to go on and score the second. We couldn't get it done. So, to blame Xhaka for the loss, he didn't help. But the team still should have risen above that.
At the end of the day, we shouldn't be 1-0 up against Brighton.
Not in a game like that.
No, when everything's to play for, we need to take our chances. John, we've managed only 4 points from the last 18. Mike and I have debated over the last few weeks how a team such as Arsenal, with all the firepower, massive wage bill, are just playing so poorly. Is it the players? Is it coaching? Tell our listeners who maybe don't listen to ABW on a weekly basis kind of what your thoughts are on just why we have just been so shit the last 2 months.
It's a combination of a few things. I think you look at team selections in certain games like Crystal Palace, you can't play El Neni and Guendouzi as your central midfield pairing, especially after the performance they put in against Everton. I know we're at home, or we've got a much better home record than we have away, but it's not strong enough. And this is a Palace team that have got one of the better away records in the league outside of the top 6 teams. I think they might be 7th in the away record league, something like that. And they've got quick players. They're going to hit you on the break. So bad decisions there. I think the Brighton game was a case of, again, poor decisions from the manager. The moment he made the 3 substitutions and we went to wing backs, you saw how much more times we actually got players behind Brighton's defence and we actually got the ball into the box. We didn't finish the chances, but at least we were actually creating something and putting some pressure in. I don't understand Emery's decisions all the time. And it's not just him, because the players do have to take fault for this as well, because a lot of their performances have just not been good enough. And they frankly haven't been up for it in enough games. You can just see in the attitude, in not going for 50-50s, not going for headers, lazy about when they track back, that kind of thing. But he will go into one game and you will see him pick the team and it's absolutely perfect and he makes all the substitutions and it's spot on and you think, wow, okay, this coach knows what he's doing. He's really studied the opponents. You get to the Brighton game yesterday, they're going to sit 4 at the back and then 5 in front, and they're just going to let you have it out wide and just let you just say, right, just swing crosses in the air and Duncan Duffy will deal with it all day. We put a team out that doesn't even have the ability to do that, has to play through the middle, play through all those players, which makes it extremely difficult. The moment we do actually go to width, we're sensible and don't play it in the air. We play it on the ground and make it very difficult for defenders to do. But why do you have to be so reactionary in a game and wait until the 70th minute when it's 1-1 and the heads are down and the players feel half beaten as it is, the crowd's on your back? The stadium atmosphere was dreadful yesterday. I don't understand why it takes so long. So a lot of it is the manager. I think the unbeaten run was flattered us, to be perfectly honest, because there was a lot of games in there where it could have gone a very different way.
Did it flatter to deceive?
Yeah, that would be the cliche. Absolutely. Ring that bell. Everyone talks about Mesut Ozil this season and they talk about the Leicester game and how amazing he was. And he was brilliant in the game. He was absolute fire. But before we scored a goal, there's a moment where Rob Holding, this is before he's injured, jumps up for a header and blatantly handballs it. It's the most blatant, obvious handball in the world, and the referee doesn't see it, and they don't get a penalty. If they get that penalty, that game's completely different, and maybe you don't see the Mesut Ozil performance that everyone gets. And there's so many occasions in games like that, in that unbeaten run, where things like that happened. They went in our favour, and we got away with it. So I think you have to question the manager's decisions. For the most part, I think he gets his substitutions right. I just question about when he does them, the timing of them. But there's definitely, Guendouzi annoys the hell out of me with his lack of tracking back, but he's 19 years old. You're asking a lot from a kid who's just come up from League Two. You can't say to him, I'm going to stick you in midfield and you're just going to boss it. It's ridiculous. You can't expect that from him. We've had no right back all season. Maitland-Niles has done amazing, don't get me wrong. I think he's been great out there. But he's not a wing back. He's not a right back at all. He's just playing that because we don't have one. The fact that we didn't even, Lichtsteiner signing was a complete joke. So the whole management, I think from way up top at the board level, some of the recruitment down to the manager and the players themselves, they're all at fault for this. But there is a general, there's like a lack of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like owning who's at fault for it. It's all, it's this guy's fault, it's that guy's fault, the way they blame things. Like the Mustafi-Leno mix-up where he lit Zaha through in the Palace game. He immediately jumps on Leno as if it's Leno's fault that he hasn't come out for the ball. You take ownership of it. Say, no, this is, okay, yeah, I've made a mistake.
It might have something to do with why the agenda's against him, because he's constantly raising his hands up in the air.
But I think that it's not just him. The thing is, you see that from him on the pitch, but I think it's just a general thing at the club. No one takes ownership of anything they get wrong. Yeah. And it's just that the blame is always passed on to someone else. You know, it's a lot of retrospective now, of people saying, oh, well, this is because it's Wenger's squad left over, and, that's why Emery can't do anything with it. Well, yeah, to a certain extent, it is an unbalanced squad, and there are some issues with it that clearly need to be resolved. But you're hired as a coach, Emery, to come in, and you know exactly what players you've got, so you've got to deal with that. Mm-hmm. That's your job. Your job is to get top 4 or to win the Europa League. Now, if he wins the Europa League, fair enough, fair play to him. He's done amazing, but he's failed in the league, to be perfectly honest, and he's failed spectacularly at the moment when it matters the most.
Given how everybody else has performed, similarly to Leicester season,
just like gone, completely thrown away so many games in this run that we've had as well. How many times are they going to give you opportunities to go, okay, you can jump above us now? Oh no, don't worry, you have top 4. No, you have top 4. It became a joke like the last couple of weekends.
I mean, we could have had third place wrapped up 3 weeks ago. We could be going into these remaining matches with it's just.
If we had drawn all these games instead of losing them, we would have been in the.
I mean, you look at the predictions from the start of the season from most of the journalists. Not everyone's going to agree, but a lot of people had Chelsea like 5th or 6th. Sarri's coming in, it's a totally different style of play. The squad's very different and unbalanced. Arsenal, I think, were actually most people's team were for 4th. Man United were lower down, but it was Man United and Chelsea most people had missing out. I think he's underachieved in the league, definitely, because we've been given so many chances to jump into that top 4 slot.
Yeah.
I predicted Fulham to finish 7th, so that shows how much.
I mean, they spent 100 million.
They spent 112 million, and they got a huge problem now. We're talking see you in League One next season.
Yeah.
Just another quick shout out to the chat before we move on to the next stage. Nikki Wilson's joined us. Oh my God, this is the worst crossover since Batman versus Superman. Danny the GFP is in there with us now, so we're seeing double with him. James CO from New York City, not Boston, is in the chat. Recipient of a hug from me a few weeks ago. Pablo Amar is in here. Ant CL 1082, is that it's going to be 1,082 years until we're back in the Champions League? Is that what the name means? And a couple other people. So thanks again for joining us. We got a new segment now called Mike's Soapbox. It's a segment that's been going on for about 3 years, but we've never actually called it that. But I got to talk about one thing that has been very publicly annoying me lately. So 3 or 4 Valencia supporters were captured on film at the end of the game. I believe it was the end of the game, making racist and anti-Semitic gestures in the direction of what I believe is block 23 in the chat and the clock end. And it's sadly, obviously, all too common around the world. It's nothing new. It's nothing that surprised me, but it seems to be getting more and more so back into football, especially. But on Friday morning, Valencia releases a statement in both Spanish and English. It was not poorly translated. It was directly translated in Spanish, publicly condemning the isolated offenders and pledging to take strong action against them, which is great. It's exactly what they should have said. So why the fuck did they need a club who has apparently, I've learned, very strong anti-Semitic, anti-fascism, anti-Semitic, I should say, and an anti-fascist background in both the city and the football club? Why do they need to add a third part of the statement that starts with the word while? The statement is, while these actions are completely unjustifiable under any circumstances, okay, VCF is also working to obtain more information about any possible provocations leading up to the verbal and gesticular exchange between the home and away stands. Can either of you please give me a good explanation for what the point of that statement was? What possible benefit does that serve? How do you provoke somebody other than like a huge poster of Sammy Davis Jr., how do you provoke somebody into anti-black, anti-Jewish gestures?
You don't, Mike. You don't. I mean, at the end of the day,
I mean, there's been criticism from all over the place about this, and then there's this backlash of people criticizing the people who criticize it and saying you're not taking Valencia's history into account. It wasn't all the player or all the fans.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't.
And nor are most people criticizing that. They're just saying this was a stupid thing to say.
Look, if you disagree with what I'm about to say, stop listening to our podcast altogether. But you're either racist or you're not. There's nothing that a person who is of color or a different religion can do to you where you would respond in a racial manner. That is like an anti-Semitic. There's no reason for it. You go to that match knowing that you're going to make that type of a gesture. And I said it to you, I think in a text, the only way that this stops in football is when the club gets kicked out of a competition, when it becomes such a paramount that it blows up where the Europa or UEFA just go to Valencia, hey, there's no leg 2, you're done. That's the only way any of this ever stops. And maybe it doesn't stop, Mike, but it's the only way it stops. And there's nothing that drives a person to do any of those things, anything justifiable in that nature, unless you are 100% a racist. No person with an education or a mind that can think clearly would do that unless they are just 100% a racist. And so, if you, like I said, if you disagree with this, just stop listening to us, because you're not the kind of listener we want. At the end of the day,
subscribe so that we get the
subscribe and like, and then stop listening. But that's the way I look at it. It just, there's no reason for someone to do that unless you are 100% a racist and you are already mindful of the fact that you're going to be making those suggestive, I don't know, like it's just in
your being to react to somebody. I mean, very well across the aisle in Block 23 could have been a black person and a guy with a yarmulke on, and that's just how they just, I mean, I don't know if it was just their go-to thing. They may have been provoked into, arguing back into whatever, but not into those things. And part of the problem is, again, and Nikki, I don't know what the level of seriousness of it was, but you said in the chat it was only 2 people, and you're absolutely right. I might have said 3 or 4, but the fact is, it is clearly not, as in some fan bases and some groups of ultras, it is clearly not a Valencia thing. It is 2 isolated things. It's very much like, but much more vile than pitch invasions. And we talked about those a few weeks ago. It's the minority. Can you penalize, and John, I'll go to you in a second. Can you penalize a club for the actions of a few who may not even have been season ticket holders? We don't know. No, I don't think that it's that easy to do that. Although if it's a repetitive thing and you don't do something about it, yeah. They said and did all the right things. They pointed out, the club president, I like to point out, tweeted something, and I had to double check that it was actually the club president, tweeted out just an absolute condemnation in very, very strong words. But the problem is, why muddy the waters with the statement that implies that they were provoked? Maybe Arsenal fans should be investigated for the role that they had in the back and forth, but to imply that the gesticular and verbals were provoked in any way is just stupid. And that statement is still standing up there on the internet with that third part on it.
Yeah, I don't understand why you'd put that unless the club has, I don't know, if the club has a history of this. I don't know that much about Valencia and their history. If the club has a history of this, maybe the club's put it out to like placate some of their fans. Maybe there is like a rogue ultra group that is this way inclined. And I'm not saying it's right, but obviously certain leagues, they have a way of policing these things and they have a level at which they police it. And in some leagues, quite frankly, they don't bother. They just let it happen, which is, I watch a lot of Serie A, and some of the racism in that league is ridiculous. Some of the things that, the players and the abuse they get and what the fans give out.
It's almost more institutional in those settings. And that's what I was referring to.
And
my research shows it's not that way with Valencia.
Yeah, unfortunately, in in a lot of those cases, the league doesn't do anything. I think you obviously have to identify the two fans and ban them, which it looks like the club is doing. That's fine. If it's a repeat thing that happens more times, then I don't think fines work in football, because the amounts that UEFA and everyone fine, it's like 20 grand, 50 grand, which is nothing to a football club. That's pennies in their back pocket. You've got to do stadium bans, which is, it's unfortunate for the home fans, for the majority of the fans, which is, 99.9% of the fans aren't that way inclined at all. What that does encourage, though, if you get something like that, is that if they see a fellow fan who is doing that sort of thing, acting in that way, in that behaviour, I'm not saying be a grass, but if there is some idiot next to me at a football ground who's doing a Nazi salute or screaming racist things or religious, whatever it is, first of all, I'd pull them up on it, and if they continued, then I'd call for a steward. You don't have to confront them yourselves. You don't have to, if you don't want to, and you don't even have to go to the steward publicly in front of you. You can do it quietly, and they will come and they'll remove them. And you have to, I think clubs nowadays have to encourage, and for the most part, I think most fans are like this anyway, but you have to encourage fans to, it is grassing, if you want to call it that, or whatever way you want to talk about it, but it doesn't matter. These people they don't deserve to be at football in the first place.
There are times that you have to be a grass or grass. Grass, saying it like a grass doesn't sound, grass sounds, Anyway, yeah, and I've heard about that. I had a debate with somebody where it was determined that someone in the North Bank earlier this season was making hissing noises. Yeah. And within 5 minutes, they were out of the stadium because of self-policing from the fans who wouldn't have it. And and I've had Y-word debates coming out the rear end about, with people about Spurs and our fans are not, these perfect group of people. No, not who don't agitate and there are surely racists and anti-Semites and everything else in our fan base as well. Absolutely. But it was comforting to hear that at least in one case, probably many, that there's some self-policing that goes on.
I think for the most part, that is what happens on a away day like that, and it's European night. Maybe the other Valencia fans, the Arsenal fans, I'm sure they are shouting back and forth abuse. You've been to football games, you know what it's like. It's kind of part of the show. It's kind of pantomime. Sometimes it gets a bit heated. Maybe there's an Arsenal fan who said something, I don't know, derogatory to Spanish people or, whatever it is. That doesn't excuse what they did. And if anything, if there was an Arsenal fan who did that, then they should be reported as well. But
absolutely, but not as provocation to racism. Yeah. I'm willing to admit it was a stupid thing to say, and not a vile racist intent or anti-Semitic intent from the club. But they probably should have at least amended the statement. But that's my soapbox. Nikki, I have a few words for you. Aluminum, Jaguar, Adidas, Nike, Puma, and what are some other words that I say wrong? He says can't even say Jaguars and aluminium properly. So yes, I'm American, in case anyone didn't know. Next, speaking of, you talked about stadium bans. Maybe Valencia gets, they have to forfeit the second leg, and then the game in Baku is forfeited because of the Armenian thing, and we just are crowned Europa League champions tomorrow. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but speaking of that issue, we are now approaching the point where we have to discuss something that was an issue around our group stage against Karabag or Douchebag or whatever they're called. Frankly, based on his play lately, I'm not sure we want him there. But if we make the final, John, does Henrik Mkhitaryan petition the Azerbaijani government for a special visa? I think we know that he would get one, but do we go that route with Mkhitaryan if we make the final?
I think they offered him one before when we were in the group stage, and he said he denied it and said no, it's fine. I don't want to cause any.
The game was almost a dead rubber, though.
Yeah, he's so bad away from home. Like his form is so bad. But if you don't take him, that means you're chucking on from the bench. Well, not Denis Suarez. I don't even know who that guy is. He hasn't played for us, has he?
Well, and he's hurt anyway.
I mean, Nketiah, I guess, and I don't know who you'd put. You'd have to take him just because you need the players on the bench because you need something off the bench. But I certainly wouldn't start him. No. If there was anyone else we could take who's serviceable, I'd take them because his away form is atrocious. Honestly.
Yes, his home form hasn't been lovely either lately. I mean, he had that month after he returned from injury where he was outstanding.
Yeah,
and it just completely fell apart. It's ridiculous that they were picked to host this final, given their international ban of Armenians. I mean, I don't claim to know the background. I know it's a very complex background. Seems to me that that a country that says you're not allowed to come here shouldn't be hosting, but I guess you could say that about the United States right about now.
It's weird. I mean, it goes into like the World Cup with Qatar having it and the issues there, and it's the stupid thing of sport trying to remove itself from politics. And every other sport, I think,
very idealistic.
Yeah, I think most other sports actually do it quite well, and football is the only one that is absolutely atrocious. And FIFA and UEFA just go, "Oh, we're just going to ignore everything that's happening in the real world. We're just here to play football, and the amount of money we're getting has nothing to do with it whatsoever." To be fair, I can't actually think of a single Armenian player other than Mkhitaryan. So.
Yeah, I mean, there really aren't. Nikki, by the way, you're wrong. If we finish fifth, Spud's fourth, and we win Europa League, Spuds are not moved out of fourth place. There's just 5 Champions League teams, so that's a commonly done thing. Last word on Baku. If I had like an extra $4,000 lying around, I would 100% fly off to Baku. I would stand outside the stadium wearing a Mkhitaryan jersey, holding up a big boombox on my shoulder, blasting System of a Down for like hours before the game, and and it's fine because I have tons of life insurance, or life assurance. Sorry. In lighter news, did you hear about the big love story in the Arsenal women's team?
I did not hear about this, no.
Yeah, apparently, Danielle Van de Donk, star midfielder for the brand new Women's Super League champions, is getting married. Unfortunately, it's not to an Arsenal player, it's to a Wolves player, midfielder Leander Den Donker. So,
okay.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, midfielder for Arsenal, number 7, Daniel Van de Donk Den Donker. It's the best name. They're not actually getting married. Forget who it was, but there was another couple of players in the Premier League that if they had gotten married with a hyphenated name, even though they're 2 men, today that's perfectly acceptable. It would have been an interesting name. But anyway, we're going to have to start addressing silly season soon. But Andy, you wanted to talk about Lacazette.
Yeah, he registers as our player of the year. I think that, there's probably no other player that is better equipped to win the award. I just wanted to hear your guys' opinion on if you thought it was a suitable individual to win it.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. I think if Ramsey had been fit more, then maybe he would have snuck it. But Lacazette, just in terms of, I mean, ignoring his goals for a start, just his work rate off the ball, it's fantastic. I think he plays with the right attitude. He's always trying. He tracks back. He's weird because he does a lot of the stuff that Giroud used to do, and people used to give Giroud so much stick.
I thought the same thing yesterday when he did something that was like so skillful and like a wave, like not involved in attacking, that I literally thought about that Giroud comparison yesterday, and then I was like, he's silly bringing that up, but
yeah, but
it's silly coming from you.
I just think in the way he occupies defenders, his movement's great, his first touch. I think his whole attitude and stuff, and he's refreshing. You see the fans have really bought into him. And when he first came into the club, he kind of had a little bit of a difficult spell. He started off well, and then he had that injury, and I don't think he ever quite got back from that. And he seemed to have lost a little bit of pace. Then he had the surgery, and he was fine again. Obviously, the bromance between him and Aubameyang is fantastic. He's never going to be, for me, like the very, very top shelf level strikers. He's not going to hit I don't think he's ever going to be a 25 goal plus, or 30 goal a season striker, in the world class. I know there's been reports about Barcelona and stuff. I don't think that's true, to be perfectly honest. He's never going to be quite at that level of a football club. but he's just below that, and everything he gives off the ball just makes him outstanding. In kind of the way that when you saw Suarez at his peak at Liverpool, what he would do off the ball in terms of tracking, harassing goalkeepers, defenders, closing down, his work rate for the team, his attitude, the energy he brings, and trying to drag players up with him and motivate them and stuff as well. There really isn't anyone else in the squad who I think epitomises that so much. Maybe Koscielny a little bit this season has surprised me how he's come back from the injury. He's kind of got the similar thing. But I'd love it if the rest of our team had Lacazette's attitude, because I think he's been fantastic. We did a little review on like players in the squad who we would keep, who we would let go, that kind of thing, if money was no option, and all fairy tale stuff. And there were so few players we'd keep, but the one name that everyone said straight away was Lacazette. Was like first on the list of players.
I'm writing down Lacazette greater than peak Luis Suarez. Got that. You mentioned the Barcelona link. Word is that they're sniffing around for him with a supposed price tag of 70 million. You've obviously stated you don't believe it, but the two questions about that. One, do you take that deal if it's real? Second, would you counteroffer to accept 20 million and to throw a player in? And I'm not talking about Umtiti, I'm talking about Mustafi.
So hang on, they pay 20 million and they get Lacazette and Mustafi.
Yes, and we're happier than getting 70 million just for Lacazette.
I mean, that'd be interesting. That'd probably please more of the fans than the other way around. That's how much Mustafi's hated. 70 million is hard to turn down.
He's what, 29, 30 years old?
No, I think
no, he was younger. He was
27, I think. Lacazette.
He came here. He was 24, 25. I was thinking of Aubameyang's age.
Yeah, he's 27. Yeah, so he's 28 at the end of this month. So he's still got some, like 3-4 years at like his peak in him.
But if we sell him for 70 million, who can we actually buy to replace him?
De Ligt. And just play him up front. I don't care. I just want that guy.
I mean, this is the thing. As much as that money would be great, and I think in an ideal world, I probably would accept it because we are short of cash, and if we don't make Champions League, we're going to have to sell anyway, and that's such a good offer. You can't really turn it down. You've still got Aubameyang, who, for me, I do actually think he's starting to get on the downturn of his career. But he's still going to get you a lot of goals regardless. And obviously you can reinvest that money. The problem is who are you letting take that money and reinvest it? Because I do not trust Sanyehi, and I don't necessarily trust Emery with his choices in terms of recruitment. If Sven Mislintat was still here and they said there's 70 million, go and reinvest that in the squad, I would be more than confident for him to come back and say, like, he's a 22-year-old striker, he's a 18-year-old, left back, and 21-year-old midfielder. I've got you all of that for 70 million. They'll be great. They're all development projects.
There's a player we could probably get. We could pry away from Juve for 70 million. I hear he's not available, but if we offer 70 million to Juve for that Ramsey guy, do you think we can get him?
I saw someone saying that yesterday in our chat box. They were saying, if we sold, Welbeck's gone, so we've got his money. We've got Czech's money as well now.
Put in a cheeky bid for Ramsey.
Yeah, just put in a little bid for Ramsey. You never know. Juve might say yes.
He might, he's already surplus to requirements there. So, if you take that deal in?
If we want a bit of a nightmare, like headache kind of striker, who's very, very good, but his agent's a nightmare, then Mauro Icardi might be stepping out of Inter Milan.
His agent is his wife, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's great to look at, but Jesus Christ, you do not want to talk to that woman. She's fucking mental.
I was about to say, if people say that about my wife, until you added that second part, and I'm not going to say that now. Andy, do you take 70 million for Lacazette?
No. Only because in this market, to get someone of his caliber to come in and replace him, I don't even think we could get Icardi for that. Then you got to look at the wage budget. And it wasn't just his presence in front of goal. It's just how he is on the pitch. He's kind of like Henry, where he will drop back to receive the ball. He doesn't do it as much. He doesn't make those darting runs. But there were just moments in a match where our midfielders weren't stepping up, and all of a sudden you saw Lacazette come in and make a challenge, and you're thinking, oh, fuck, that was awesome. And he's got a good work rate. And so no, I wouldn't take it.
Yeah, James in the chat has said was great seeing Locke point at his head, telling others to focus. I mean, we need to sign more players who know how to point at their head. That's clear. I mean, that's
Flamini back. He was the king of pointing. Flamini was great at it.
Flamini would point to his head and say, "I'm smart enough to start a $400 billion company. Why aren't you guys good enough to start $400 billion?" So, one more transfer comment, and it's just that at this point, there's never been a time where the value of Premier League experienced players, especially defenders, in my opinion, have been higher. And I know that, there are premiums placed on players that most would consider average or certainly just not flashy. But that's exactly what I think we need at this point. I mean, I'll take a pass all day on guys like Koulibaly or Manolis or any of these big name defenders from the continent. And they're going to take 2 or 3 years to adapt to the Premier League. I mean, guys like Mangala, Daley Blint. I mean, there are some good purchases, aside from that have contributed very early on to their new teams. But in general, they're kind of hit or miss. And before you really see the best of them, it's a season, 2, even 3 seasons, if they last that long before they go back. So, I mean, we can't risk. I mean, our window is we got to sign people that can help us get back up. And to me, taking guys from the bottom 14 teams in the Premier League who've played and held their own in the league for a few years, who want to play in Europe and aren't now, who would like to have presumably more talented players in front of them. I mean, you'd think that would be something that would be a great opportunity rather than trying to pry guys away from Champions League teams on the continent for Europa League football here. They don't have to be English per se. They just have to be Premier League experience. So, Fredo, who is the fellow Saints Saints supporter that I talked about, asked, who would be the players from the clubs below you'd like to see us target? Any interest in the likes of Ryan Fraser, Matt Ritchie, Jean-Michel Seri? He says William Zaha, who apparently is Wilfred Zaha's younger brother. I'd add guys like Dunk, Maguire, Ake,
I was going to
Chilwell.
say the first name for me is Harry Maguire. I
haven't really heard that much about him. He was incredible, I think, at the World Cup. He was good after that. Not so much this season, but
I want a no-nonsense.
I haven't heard so much this season.
Yeah, I want a no-nonsense English defender who can come in and partner with Holding. I think he brings the World Cup experience. I think that he does have that little chip on his shoulder where he will push defenders and lead. Mike, I've been saying it all season. I want someone who's going to turn around and rip you a new asshole when you make a mistake, and I think he will give us that. And he's Premier League ready. I can see him in a few seasons from now going to a United and doing a Rio Ferdinand where he becomes an absolute legend for a club like that. So why not grab him now? I think he will be expensive, but why not go in for it? He's Premier League ready, and I think he's trainable. I think he's coachable.
That's the thing for me. I mean, we gotta spend money wisely, and from everything I'm hearing, Raul, his inclination is to go abroad. That scares me a bit. I just, how many more funky pieces can we throw in there, and then a year later or 2 years later we're talking about them like we are Mustafi? I mean, it's these guys are good enough already, and we know they're good enough already. They're just maybe not the fastest, high flying person that we see performing well in the Champions League because they're playing for teams that are never going to make the Champions League. John, I mean, who would you identify, or are you on board with that strategy?
I mean, there's so many. I mean, you look at Wolves. I actually think it'd be really difficult to get most of the players out of there because the trajectory that club's on, and if they're really buying into it, and the manager, and they're investing a lot of money. But you mentioned Dendoncker; he's not a bad player.
He's on loan though.
Yeah,
from Anderlecht.
He's a very good player, Diego Jota. But if you're looking in defence, I mean, they've got Ryan Bennett, Willy Bolly, Connor Cody. They're all great players.
Yeah,
Keane at Everton, Maguire, Nathan Ake. I really like, who I think would be cheaper just because he's not British, so you don't get that premium. That is one thing we do need to address. Is I think we'll be below the quota for British players for next season
because Ramsey's gone.
Ramsey and Welbeck gone. So so that is something we're going to have to spend some money somewhere. Fraser is another player who I do like. the price tag would be the thing that would concern me again with some of those.
Some of these guys have gotten too hyped that they're no longer. They're going to go to one of the 3 clubs that can pay the premium that we won't. I won't say
the one issue I have with like the defenders we're talking about, where you talk about Keane, Maguire, Tarkowski at Burnley, they're all good players. They're all decent defenders. They're all very serviceable. I think they're fine, but they are in teams that work a system. They know how to play it, and they're all drilled very well. My worry is that if you get one of those players in, they come into this team, are they going to be as good? Because they come into what is essentially at the moment a dysfunctional team that doesn't necessarily have a clear identity on the way it plays. If we had a clear style of play and identity, then I'd be more confident about saying, yeah, you can go and get Dunk or Duffy from Brighton, who are both really good centre backs. They love to defend. They are properly no nonsense, and just say, yeah, you come in, you come like lead marshal of the defence. That's the one worry with it. But the fact we don't look within the Premier League itself for players is always kind of baffled me. And not just the Premier League as well, like below into the Championship. There's some fantastic players. You look at how James Maddison, who's at Leicester, how well he's done this season. He looks like an absolutely Rolls Royce of a player. He's lovely to watch on the ball. He's great skill, talent, through balls, gets goals, assists. And he was just a kid they plucked out of the Championship. Jason talks about a young kid, I think he's 18, Dan James at Swansea. Absolute rapid pace. We've been screaming for a winger for so long. He's 18 years old. He's in a mid-table Championship side. You might be able to tempt Swansea with 10, 15 million quid. Sometimes you just have to take a punt. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Well, Rob Holding's an example of that.
Yeah, that's a
Why
player.
don't we do that more?
Yeah, that's a player who you can go, this one's a little bit of a free roll. Okay, we can take that. We'll give it a go. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, he gets some Premier League experience. A few years' time, we can sell him to an Everton or Watford or whoever. Maybe we get our money back. But this is the sort of deals that we have to look at now, going forward until we're back into the Champions League regular and got that revenue back in. Because you're not going to be able to go out and compete at the top table. It's just pointless trying to.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Welcome to the chat, Kelly Maher, Archie, Screamboy8. Sounds like a perfect name for one of our guests in the future, Screamboy. Let's move on to some user questions and comments. A couple that we got over Twitter, and then we've gotten a bunch of great questions in the chat today. If you have any others that you want us to sort through, if we have enough time, go ahead and put them in now. From Danny in Godmanchester, who for some reason always pops up with a question when we have ABWers on with us. Am I online right now?
Yeah.
Okay, because everything is frozen. I just wasn't sure whether I was coming through or not. If you could have any 2 current Arsenal players to come work for you, one as a butler and the other as a personal nurse to do all your ablutions, back, sack, and crack washing, etc., who would they be and why? And don't forget that they would have to retire from football to take the unpaid positions. I think that one's for you, John.
Wow. Okay. Personal butler. I think I'd want someone with some character. You can have a good laugh with. Obviously, you've got to be able to trust them as well, that they will do everything you say. So I think Jenkinson would be good for that. Because you could have, you'd have good chats with him. And whenever you see shows in the butlers, they're, like Fresh Prince, Batman. I'm struggling to think of any other shows with butlers. But they've always had good banter back and forth. So
Andy's House.
Jenko would be good for that one. A personal maid. Who would I want to suffer that? Oh, I mean, most fans. I don't know. You could say Mustafi, but that just seems cruel. I'd give it to Ozil. I'd make him work, earn that money.
Oh, it's an unpaid position. I'm not sure that he'll take that, but thank you, Danny, for the question.
And I require all my butlers to slide tackle whoever enter and exit my home. So Mustafi's just the perfect candidate.
I know not to ring the doorbell when I come over to
you guys
see his mom now. I actually come in the basement.
Yeah.
I don't mean I come in the basement. I mean I enter the basement. I don't mean enter, but guess who lives in the basement, John? Some of the questions that are left over from Ziggy from last week, David Ziegler.
Oh, Christ, here we go.
Is it possible that some fan somewhere has been unknowingly ignoring a match day superstition that, as it turns out, was actually working? And it's funny that he mentions this because I had a match day superstition back in our first season of the podcast where I would take a pregame walk. It didn't matter if the game started at 7:30, 9 o'clock, whatever it is. I would take a pregame walk about 3, 4, 5 miles, whatever. And for every mile I walked, we would normally win the game with that many goals. And I stopped walking before my son's bar mitzvah was the day of the Middleborough game, where it was a 0-0, it was a drab 0-0 affair. And then we went to England for the derby a couple weeks later, and just that whole interruption of my normal routine stopped the walking, and we just started losing at that point. So I started again, finally, a week or two ago, and I got up early and went on a long walk before the Brighton game, and it didn't fucking do shit. So the answer is no, it's not possible. Does the phrase scrotum scraper make you think, and there are 5 options here: bad online review for pants, name of new roller coaster, worst death metal band ever, strange pro wrestling finishing move, or unnecessary as seen on TV product? Andy, let's go to you for that, since you and David are so simpatico.
It screams bad online review for pants.
Okay,
right?
That's your answer. There's no right or wrong in this kind of thing.
Well, there's always a
that
right or
screams
wrong
death
with
metal
Ziggler.
band to me.
John, do you want to have a go on this?
Yeah, that definitely screams death metal band to me. There's
Well, it's like Pantera would be.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's Spanish for panther, right? I think that's Spanish.
I thought it was
The
Swedish
era of pants.
for scrotum scraper.
But yeah, there is a band I listen to called Dying Fetus. So scrotum scraper sounds about
my
right.
Goodness, that's aggressive.
That is death metal, like literally.
No, honestly, they're a folk band, I swear.
Isn't there K9? Have you heard of K9us?
Yeah.
The lead singer is a fucking dog. Not. I don't mean that in the insulting sense of a woman. I mean like an actual dog. I don't think any of the above for scrotum scraper. It makes me think of one of my first college girlfriends. But
Oh God.
Anyway, yeah, that's going to be it for David's questions for a while. As for the questions in the chat, we've gotten a bunch of good ones today. First of all, from Dial Square One, there's again lots of anti-Kroenke sentiment over here. And previously, I've heard you Gooners in the States defend Kroenke with some well thought out arguments. What are your current thoughts? Andy, you're the Kroenke expert. You live on the outskirts of his compound.
I do. Might be going to his compound very soon, actually. Maybe, if not tonight, Michael. So,
Game 6.
Yeah,
Game 7? No, Game 6.
It's Game 6. I think the appointment of Unai Emery was a good one. You don't win 3 Europa League finals without being a good manager. I think this summer will speak volumes for the Kroenkes with how much they're going to allow him to invest, how they're going to support in that investment. I still stand fast by the fact that Josh did come over and ruffle some feathers and make changes around this time last year. And it's still early going. I don't think a manager like Unai Emery would have taken the Arsenal position if he didn't have the backing. He kept talking about how his conversations this time last year with the Kroenkes were positive. He hasn't had an opportunity to bring in his own players. I think the majority of those players were signed before he became our manager. So long story short, I think we need to give the Kroenkes a little bit more time. I'm not saying that they're blameless, but they've invested with us in the past. And I think that we just need to let them work with Emery to get those players in. The right players in. And I don't think they're going to say no. We're not going to go out and bid for Mbappe, but if they come out and they give us 60 to 100 million this summer on top of whatever we're allowing to leave the club, I think that's a fair return on ownership.
John, your thoughts, and then I'm going to chime in on anything that you don't actually steal from me.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's difficult from over here. Obviously, we don't hear as much about Kroenke, and I know his baseball team is doing well.
It's the one sport he doesn't own a team in.
Yeah, he doesn't own that. So he has his Avalanche and Nuggets are both doing really well this season.
That's it, yeah.
And then
Denver hockey and basketball.
Yeah, and then obviously his Rams, his Colorado Rapids are absolutely awful.
We might be able to beat them in July when we play them.
Yeah, they hired their manager last week, so who knows?
I mean, the encouragement I took from the interviews I've heard with Josh Kroenke, who I hope is taking more of an interest in at Arsenal, is what I saw him do at the Rams, where he came in and he brought in a young coach, kind of changed things up a little bit there, and you saw what they achieved. Getting to the Super Bowl is really impressive. The turnaround, ignoring all the moving city thing, and that's a totally different thing, and it's just kind of what happens in NFL. It's a different sport. I do think you need to give him time. You can't judge him straight away. He was never going to do anything whilst Ismanov was still had a big share in the club. It's different now, so you have to see how he does his first summer. I agree with Andy. I don't think he's going to go spend fortunes because, quite frankly, at the moment, one, he's got other things to invest in, and two, not sure exactly what direction the club is going. And I think they're still trying to stick with the whole sort of self-sustaining model that Arsenal really wanted to do, and Gazidis did as well. I think there's a lot more to be said about what the board members at the club do in terms of commercially and getting revenue in that way. That's what really needs to be improved on. And I hope the Kroenkes pay attention to that side of the business and try and encourage that more. Because if you get the commercial revenue up, that's how you generate real revenue to actually spend and put out on the pitch.
Yeah, and the criticisms about Kroenke are always, he doesn't put his own money into the club. That's bullshit. He can't, not to buy players. He's taking money from us and put it into the Rams. That's bullshit. He's buying real estate. He's not doubling the Rams payroll. You can't do that.
Yeah.
He should just name his new stadium in LA the Arsenal Stadium, and
the Arsenal funded stadium.
The Arsenal Stadium, and for every ticket purchased, money goes back into the club, and then he could go ahead and put Walmart training facility at Colney, and then
he should have Arsenal sponsor the stadium and pay like £60 million for the naming rights and call it Arsenal Stadium as a way of getting more money for the Rams.
And then I think he should put a minimum 200 shirts into each Walmart across the country. And there we go. Commercial up.
Yep. And the thing for me though is this summer and we talk about it every week, the number of of pounds, dollars, euros, yen that we can add to the payroll this summer is astounding.
Well, look at what just walked out of the club yesterday at the match with Ramsey, Czech, and
well, that's part of it. The new commercial deals are part of it. And even without Champions League football, we could spend a lot more than 100 million in transfer fees and take on some salaries that are in the the 150 to 225 range, not just one player but multiple players if we wanted to. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, blowing your whole wad, and then getting into the same salary constraint situation that we're in prior to now, and striking out on getting back into that's a big gamble to make. And if you don't make the Champions League, it will be years and years and years and years before we do. So I don't see that happening. But by the same token, if we don't spend money to replace the very needs that we have, do it smartly, which may not mean splashing mad cash on 70 million pound players. Yeah. That I can't blame on just about anybody else than Kroenke. Because there's no more Arsene Wenger holding the purse strings tight to blame anymore.
Let me ask you both this, and it can just be a quick yes or no, but come August, the transfer window is closing, and we have signed 2 center backs, and that's it. And both center backs are in our opinion, Premier League ready to go out and do business. Are we happy with that transfer window?
I'm not, no.
No.
Because I think there's more needs to be done to the squad. I don't expect you to do it, them to do it all in one window, but I guess, we definitely need a centre mid of some sort, and we need a forward of some sort. People have spoken about Reece Nelson coming back. He's still not playing that often for Hoffenheim.
No.
He needs another loan. Joe Willock is a player who needs to go out on loan, which means we need more midfielders because we need cover there. There's other players going to be leaving the club besides the one, the three that we've already spoken about. So you've got to bring in, maybe Bellerin might need some competition. We've got Kolasinac at left back. That's it. There's a lot of positions to fill in the squad.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be happy with. I'd be pleased that they finally, stop their over reliance. I mean, if we go into next season with Socrates, Mustafi, and Koscielny as our three center backs until Holding is ready to play, we can just write the season off from the start. It's just not good enough. So yeah, I would be happy with the center back signings, but there is by no means a successful summer transfer window, nor will we have used the financial strength that we will have gained on June 1st or July 1st, whenever it is, if that's all we do. And we don't replace Ramsey and we don't replace Welbeck and do something about, if we go into the season with Ozil having to play virtually every game or having zero service to our forwards, we're in bad shape. So no, that wouldn't be a good transfer window. Next question for you, Andy, from Mike Hernandez. Why does Andy call La Liga a feeder league with most, but with some other guests, he calls it the second best league? Phil Shane. He was clearly kissing some ass.
No, I think we suggested to Phil Shane that we joke about how it's a feeder league. I only do it because one of our good friends loves it, and it just pisses him off to no end. And 90% of the time, he bites the bait.
Oh, he bites. Of course, he bites the bait. He's like me. He bites every single piece of bait that's out there. We love you, Tom Canton.
Yeah, but yeah, he bites and bites. Yeah, that's the only reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else that you?
No, no. There's only two teams that ever win the league, so it's just feeder league. So
almost always correct on that.
I think since 2002.
No, I think Atletico snuck in there like maybe 2014. I think it was the year that we won the first FA Cup. I feel like they won the title, and that was it. Two questions from Payush Kapoor. First, despite getting a lot of opportunities to get in the top four, is it now safe to say Arsenal are this season's biggest bottlers? Also, with this poor performance, I don't think we will win Europa. Biggest bottlers? No, I'd say Manchester United are the biggest bottlers, but certainly when it mattered the most, we certainly surrounded ourselves with lots of bottles. Anyone else think we're the biggest?
No. Look,
or were we good enough to bottle anything in the first place, which was a lot of.
Yeah, look. If I know you hate the way this is said, Mike, but if the beginning of the season you had said to Mike Feinberg and probably John, hey, you're going to be in the four. It's down to the last day, and you're going to be in the mix for fourth place. You're in the Europa League semifinal with a comfortable lead going into the second leg. We would have all taken that. It's the point of, I think we've bottled the last 2 months. I think this whole season has been a transition season. I think it's opened up our eyes as seeing, hey, under Arsene Wenger, these players weren't great. Under Unai, they haven't been great. I want to give him one more season to make changes. I think this summer is going to be huge. There's no way we're walking into this summer there's no way we were entering May without them knowing who they're going to go after transfer-wise. And I can guarantee you, Mike, we're not going to be pushing it like we did under the Arsene Wenger era where we go into the transfer window, deadline day, trying to sign players. This is all going to be done before our preseason tour.
Yeah, that changed last summer.
Yeah.
I'm not confident that will happen this summer, though. That's my worry.
What?
I'm not confident that will happen this summer. That's my worry.
See, I think it is, and the reason I think that is because I think Unai is just such that planner. He's going to want to have everyone coming in under the same under the same kind of umbrella of responsibility and understanding before they get to the States. I think he's going to want to have that whole team in. He's going to want to have them rested going through his preseason. And I think we're going to see players shipping out here as soon as that. The worst thing that Europa League final is going to do for us, Mike, is it's just going to delay the inevitable of getting this all going.
Yeah. Well, if that's the worst part of that, then I'll take it. And I did pay double price for my tickets for the summer tour because of Isco coming. And if it doesn't happen, I'm going to be asking for a refund. John, bottlers, but then also, another from Payush, do you think we should go for Mourinho? He is currently available. I personally don't like him, but at least he can fix our defense and make it tough for other teams to score against us. Do you have any answer other than mine, which is no?
I support a team that Mourinho has managed in Inter Milan, and he won the treble
and the Seattle Supersonics.
And it was amazing winning the treble. It was the worst football I've ever watched in my life. Samuel Eto'o was playing left back and right back at times. It was amazing. And Diego Milito became the most prolific striker I've ever seen. But I mean, he gets results.
But that guy just disappeared after that.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I wouldn't take him. There are rumours Inter might go back for him, so that'd be interesting if that happens. As for the
bottom, I hear yesterday, Celtic. I heard yesterday.
Oh yeah, Celtic was the talk yesterday. Yeah, I mean, I know people laugh because it's the Scottish League, but it's still a big prestige name club. Regardless,
well, if he's looking to just rack up extra, championship trophies, he could do the double there pretty easily next season.
No, I wouldn't take Mourinho. As for the bottlers thing, honestly, you could just, if you could get like a four-sided coin, if there's a thing, I don't know, something four-sided, and just flip it, and just Man United, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, because all four of us have just like, I came up with the idea of getting a pitch, like a perfect square pitch with 4 goals, just putting all 4 teams on, and basically whoever scores the most goals in 90 minutes, they get a spot in the top 4. Because honestly,
I've seen that done at my son's youth team practices. There's like a drill or something that involves that.
Not one of those teams, honestly, probably deserves top 4 for the way they've all been pretty much chucking it away in the last few weeks.
Grant, I'm on a massive diet right now, and for you to talk about Baconators right now is just absolutely cruel. I know that you were one of our most recent subscribers, but please keep the Baconator talk out. And now it's just going to be constant. But I'm
Mike, we should mention, because we have some great listeners who have some great ideas. We've been kind of graced with press passes for the summer tour.
It's not something I would have brought up in this podcast.
No, but we need to start thinking of things that we can do to, if we do have the opportunity to meet staff or players with Arsenal. So we should start getting ideas of things that would allow us to be different than their usual interviews and what have you. So
and ideas on things that we should not do, because I tend to have a problem with discerning between things I should and shouldn't do.
Yeah. John, here's a glimpse behind the curtain as to me saying to Mike, hey, we should start building a press packet to send to these places. And Mike's response to that was, I started drafting up a paragraph. He just added, I want your free food and drink.
No, that's what I titled the document on Google Docs. I was like, media passes equal free food and drink.
Yeah, but then you wrote a sentence.
Like someone who works for the Sun, so yeah. It's perfectly normal over here. I mean, if you want tips, just ask our Simon Collins, because I swear he never does match reports. Someone else is writing them. Simon is just getting all the free food, all the free booze.
Simon, who we also asked on we came to you after Simon turned us down a couple of weeks ago.
Oh well.
Actually, he just wasn't available.
He for the moon, and then aim a little lower, and you get me.
The last 2 ideas that you've come up with, Andy, are that and the Pornhub idea. And at first, I just kind of, along with the whole idea for the podcast a few years ago, I was just like, no, that won't work. And then I just end up obsessing over them, and 2 days later, it's done.
Well, and you know what? We have gotten good responses back. So I think it's time for our listeners to start helping us kind of build the production of what we're going to do if we meet the players, because I don't want to just ask them silly or stupid questions. I think it would be fun to get some good footage on camera of maybe them thinking like, hey, this is a little different, you know?
So you want me coming up to Isco and Xhaka and asking them what's more important than Arsenal and playing that game?
Could do that, or we could do like a Baconator challenge. Who can eat the most in 60 seconds?
100% Mustafi. All right, Lothless, James from New York. Do you agree that Son Heung-min is the nicest, friendliest, greatest human being who never loses his temper? By the way, James is from South Korea. I was trying to remember the actual name, and I don't want to mix it up, but is it the People's Republic of Korea? No, that's North Korea. Anyway, he's from Korea. I think he's kidding there, though. Did you see the picture of him crying?
Yes, I did.
Which picture of somebody crying did you prefer? The Ramsey crying or the Son crying?
They both brought me joy in different ways. It's probably the best way to describe it. One filled me with pride and good feelings and longing and admiration, and the other with just schadenfreude.
I was just about to say that's the perfect word for that. Perfect word for that. And finally, from Grant Wilborn, I usually end up with a silly one, but this is actually a serious one. With Welbs confirmed to be leading, are you worried that we need attacking reinforcements after already spending 110 million euros on strikers?
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, I am. I don't think
okay.
Nketiah is what? Hello?
Yeah, I mean, no, no, you're here.
No,
Nketiah being the next man up.
I don't think he's ready. I think John had said before earlier in the pod that he needs to go out on loan. You look at Reece Nelson, ML Smith Rowe being attacking players, they're not ready. So I really wish we would have signed Welbeck. I think he would have signed a deal with less money, with more incentive to play. But medically, he's just not there. He had enough time to impress. I think he played 14 games under Unai, so that's a lot of training and matches. And so clearly something's up with that. But yeah, we need more reinforcement up front.
John, I think it's clear that we can't just go into the season with two, although a great strike partnership, one of the world's best, as you discussed yesterday. If that's your plan and that's all you got going into the season, we're fucked.
Yeah, I mean, they're still going to get you a ton of goals. I don't doubt that. But you've got to have something else. You've got to have an attack from out wide. You've got to have pace to run in behind. You've got to have options off the bench. Like, I think Iwobi's a great player in those forward areas. But for me, he's a squad player. He's someone you can bring on. And in certain games, he's fit for it. Mkhitaryan is someone who I would, if we can sell, I would, because that's a lot of wages that we can invest. The amount of money he's on, you could maybe invest that in two players. So there's definitely room for improvement in those areas. We have not had a quick player essentially since Walcott. And the last real direct player we had was Alexis Sanchez.
I was just about to mention that guy's name, and no, I don't want him back.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want him, but I mean, I think he's done as a player. I think, he's played so much football from a young age. He's a bit like Rooney in that sense that he's just caught up to him quicker than other players.
Have you seen Wayne Rooney play lately?
I'm not going to say anything disparaging about the MLS, so let's move on.
Wayne Rooney's got a little left in the tank, let's just say that. Yeah. James says we should sign Jefferson Lerma, who trolled Son. Jefferson Lerma has already scored an amazing goal for Arsenal this season, so I wouldn't actually discourage that kind of signing too much. But that's it, man. We've run long again today, but we only run long when it's enjoyable AF. So just wanted to thank you, John, for joining us. You doing anything other than a Bergkamp Wonderland soon, or anything you want to promote, or your Twitter address or handle?
No, just if you guys want to listen, we do at the AFC podcast. We go live after every single game, 5 minutes after the show. So it's normally me, a crazy Welsh bloke called Jason, who I'm sure you saw on here last week, and then one other person that we drag in. Sometimes it's just me and Jason. Those ones you have to suffer on a little, but they're good fun. They cheer us up.
We sometimes get invites, and the first question is who is on, and then the second the second question is can you ask us again some other time? No, actually, it's a joy whenever Danny asks us to come on, because it's and I wish we could do it more, but we have butlers, which we're gonna hopefully get on soon. But
no,
I know that most of the people in the chat came here because of your podcast, so to tell them to go and listen to your podcast is a little redundant. But if somehow you're not doing that, please do, because they're among the best in the business.
Yeah, there is a rumor going around that me and Jason and Dom might be starting a Del Piero Wonderland from next season.
Oh my God.
Nothing to do with a certain Welshman going to play there. I would have to hide all my Inter Milan shirts if we do that.
And then you can listen to the one-on-one interview between Aaron Ramsey and Matt.
Yeah.
I think he's been saving up money for the last 2 years to afford Ramsey's fee.
He's nearly got enough for his fee. He's always there. But no, it's a pleasure being on, guys. Thank you. Sorry it took so long.
Oh, it's our fault. Sorry about that. Andy, anything to add?
No, I love you, Michael, and I can't wait to embrace you in just over 2 months.
Yes, that's going to happen. We will talk about whether we'll pod after the Europa League game on Thursday. Will depend on scheduling, guests, and if we lose, don't expect to see us podcasting. Yeah. So again, final thoughts have just been said. Subscribe on YouTube. We'd love to push up the subscribers. We're a little bit late to the game on YouTube in our third season, but you can use a link that will appear here shortly to do that. Please give us a thumbs up in the chat. We always forget to talk about Tappy during the chat, but if you can do that, that'll help us. If you're listening on iTunes or somewhere else, Stitcher, Spotify, you can watch us if you're free during the day or whenever we podcast. We'd love to have you join us in the chat. Today's chat was fantastic. Thank you to all of you who joined us, took time out of your day, came from both the US, UK, Belgium, Switzerland. We're an international podcast. We got that love and affection for our fellow man, and that's what
Mozambique.
We're all about. We are number one podcast in the Beak, and we have been for a long time. So in any case, Ryan Cost finishes off with Go Avs Go. I'll co-sign that. Good luck to the
We got this tonight, Ryan. We've got this.
Colorado Cronkies in ice hockey tonight, and that's it for us. Come on, you Gooners.